Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some more fascinating ancient wisdom.
Always excited to explore these hidden gems.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into Chapter 69 from the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine.
Oh, yes. A foundational text in Chinese medicine, full of insights into how they viewed health and the human body.
It's presented as a dialogue between the Yellow Emperor and his physician, Qibo, right?
Exactly. And in this chapter, they're exploring the connections between, well, pretty much everything. The heavens, the earth, the flow of qi, all influencing human health.
Okay, so like how observing the stars and understanding the natural world could reveal secrets to a long and healthy life.
You got it. Qibo explains how imbalances in this interconnected system can lead to illness.
Imbalances, huh? So it's not just about treating symptoms, but understanding the root cause of what's throwing things off kilter.
Precisely. They categorize these imbalances as excess taiguo in Chinese, which reflects like these pre-heavenly forces. And then there's deficiency bujia, which is more about how we adapt to those forces.
Interesting. So like there are forces beyond our control, but we have a role to play in how we respond to them.
Right. And they understood these imbalances through the framework of the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water.
Ah, yes. The 5 elements. Each element corresponds to specific organs, emotions, seasons.
And even planets, believe it or not.
Wait, planets. Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more about these connections.
Well, let's start with Jupiter. It's associated with the wood element.
Jupiter, wood. Okay, I'm following.
An excess of wood energy, maybe influenced by Jupiter, could manifest as strong winds and unsettled vegetation, in nature.
Makes sense. Lots of chaotic growing energy.
And in the body, they believed it could lead to things like diarrhea, headaches, even dizziness.
Yeah. Like that excess energy is just too much for the body to handle, and it comes out in all sorts of uncomfortable ways.
That's a great way to put it. And, on the flip side, a deficiency in wood energy could lead to stunted growth, weakness, lack of vitality.
Right, like a plant that's struggling to sprout. So it's not just about having too much of an element, but also about having too little.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's move on to fire. It's linked to Mars, the planet of action and intensity.
Fire and Mars. I can see that connection. What happens when fire energy is out of whack?
Well, an excess can manifest as extreme heat in nature. Think droughts, wildfire.
Oh, wow. So pretty intense stuff. And in the body.
Think inflammation, fevers, maybe even skin rashes, things that feel hot and fiery, basically.
Makes sense. It's like that internal fire is burning out of control. What about a deficiency in fire?
When fire is deficient, you might feel constantly cold, lack energy, have trouble staying warm.
So it's like your internal furnace isn't working properly. Gotcha. All right, let's move on to Earth. What did they associate with this element?
Earth is all about stability, grounding, nourishment. And they linked it to Saturn.
Saturn, the planet of limitations and boundaries. Interesting. How does that relate to Earth energy?
Well, when Earth energy is excessive, think flooding, landslides, too much moisture leading to instability.
Ah, I see. It's like the Earth element is losing its grounding, becoming too fluid and unstable.
Exactly. And in the body, this could manifest as digestive issues, bloating, feeling heavy and weighed down.
Yeah, it's like that heavy, stagnant energy is bogging you down.
Great analogy. And when Earth energy is deficient, think dry, cracked Earth. The kind that can't support life.
Right, like a parched desert.
Yeah.
So if excess Earth is a flooded field, deficient Earth is like a drought. What about metal?
Metal is associated with structure, boundaries, and protection. They linked it to Venus, which might seem a little surprising.
Venus. I usually think of love and beauty when I think of Venus. Not exactly metal. How did they connect this element to health?
Well, think about the lungs, which are associated with metal. They take in the air we need, protecting us from harmful stuff. And they allow us to express ourselves through our voice, set boundaries.
Ah, that makes sense. So our lungs are literally creating a boundary between our inner world and the external environment.
Exactly. When metal energy is excessive, think dryness, withering, a harshness that restricts growth.
Okay, I'm starting to see a pattern here. So in the body, that might look like
chest pain, breathing difficulties, maybe even bleeding.
It's like the lungs are being constricted, can't expand and contract freely. What about deficient metal?
A deficiency in metal can weaken the protective systems, making you more susceptible to illness.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a chink in the armor, leaving you vulnerable.
You got it. And finally, let's talk about water.
Water, the element of flow, adaptation, and deep reserves. What's the planetary connection here?
Water is linked to Mercury, the planet of communication and movement. When water energy is excessive, think cold, frost, stagnation, and overabundance of moisture leading to decay.
Okay, so like those overflowing rivers we talked about with Earth, but now the water is stagnant and causing problems.
Exactly. They believed excess water could manifest as cold limbs, bloating, difficulty breathing.
It's like the body's internal waterways are blocked, preventing the free flow of energy. What about deficient water?
Deficient water is like a parched landscape, unable to support life. Think dryness, lack of sustenance, feeling depleted.
Like your inner wells are running dry. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. It's fascinating how they wove together the elements, the planets, and the human body.
It really shows, how deeply they observed the world around them and how they saw those patterns reflected in us.
Yeah. It's making me think about how they might have used these connections, not just to understand illness, but maybe even to prevent it.
Exactly. Remember Taiguo and Buji, those imbalances we talked about? Well, they believed those imbalances weren't just problems to be, passively accepted.
So it wasn't about fixing the imbalance, but more about understanding the message it was sending.
Yes. It was valuable information about the state of the world and how to, harmonize with it. That's where the Tao comes in, aligning your life with the way of nature.
Right. You mentioned earlier that each element is associated with a specific season. Does that tie into this whole Dio thing?
Absolutely. Living in accordance with the seasons was, key to maintaining balance. For example, during spring, when wood energy is dominant, they might focus on activities that, promote growth and expansion, like starting new projects or spending more time in nature.
And so matching your internal energy to the energy of the season. Instead of forcing things, you're working with the natural flow.
Precisely. And this approach extended to diet, too. They believed in eating seasonally, choosing foods that corresponded to the element of each season.
So, for example, in winter, when water energy is dominant, they might eat warming, nourishing foods to counter the cold and support the kidneys, which are associated with water.
Exactly. Food as medicine, using it to strengthen the body and maintain balance throughout the year.
It's interesting how we're seeing a resurgence of that in modern nutrition today. The importance of eating locally and seasonally. It's like this ancient wisdom is being validated by modern science.
It really is.
Yeah.
And speaking of practices that have stood the test of time, acupuncture.
Oh, yes. Acupuncture. It's incredible how widely it's still practiced today. Does it work by directly addressing these elemental imbalances?
That's the idea. Acupuncture involves inserting thin needles into specific points along the body's meridians, those energy pathways, to stimulate the flow of qi and restore balance.
So an acupuncturist might use needles to address, say, an excess of earth energy if someone is having digestive issues.
Exactly. Or they might use different techniques to tonify a deficiency in fire energy if someone is always cold and tired. It's about understanding the individual's energetic patterns and working with their body to restore harmony.
It's fascinating how acupuncture, even today, seems to tap into these ideas of balancing energy flow. It's not just about treating a specific symptom, but addressing the whole person within their environment.
It's a holistic approach, for sure. And that's a core principle of ancient Chinese medicine, recognizing that the body is an intricate system, not just a bunch of separate parts.
And that we're not just individuals, but part of a larger web of life, constantly interacting and exchanging energy with everything around us.
Exactly. So in addition to acupuncture and diet, what other practices might they have used to harmonize with the Tao?
Well, I've heard of things like Tai Chi and Qigong. Do those fit into this framework?
Absolutely. Movement and exercise were super important to them. Ways to cultivate and balance qi. Tai Chi and Qigong are both mind-body practices that involve gentle, flowing movements, deep breathing, and focused attention.
I've tried Tai Chi before, and I remember feeling so grounded and centered afterward. It's like those movements were smoothing out any, rough edges in my energy.
That's a great way to describe it. And they believe these practices could not only help prevent illness, but also promote longevity and well-being.
This is all making me think about my own life and how I could incorporate some of these principles, like paying more attention to the seasons, being more mindful about what I eat, finding ways to move my body that feel nourishing.
Those are fantastic ideas. It's really about becoming more aware of how you interact with the natural world and making choices that support your unique energy.
It feels empowering to think that we have a say in our well-being, by working with these natural rhythms instead of against them.
That's the beauty of this philosophy, aligning ourselves with the Tao and letting that wisdom guide us toward greater harmony.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredible. I feel like I'm seeing the world through a whole new lens now.
It's pretty mind-blowing, right? How much wisdom these ancient traditions hold.
Totally. We've explored the 5 elements, their connections to the planets, and the concepts of excess and deficiency. We even talked about practices like acupuncture, tai chi, and seasonal eating as ways to harmonize the Tao.
So much good stuff. What's standing out to you as the most insightful or maybe even relevant, to our modern lives?
What's really sticking with me is this idea that those imbalances aren't necessarily bad things. It's more like they're signals, like messages from our bodies and from nature, that something's out of whack.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like instead of seeing illness as something to be feared and fought against, it becomes an opportunity to learn and rebalance.
Right, and I love how this ancient text encourages us to go beyond treating just the symptoms and consider the whole person, their emotions, their lifestyle, even the seasons, and those celestial influences we talked about.
It's a holistic approach, for sure, acknowledging that we're part of this larger web of life, constantly interacting and exchanging energy with everything around us.
And speaking of connections, I'm really intrigued by this idea of using this knowledge for prediction. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Sure. They believed that by observing celestial phenomena like the movements of the stars and planets, and by understanding the cycles of nature, they could anticipate potential imbalances, in the 5 elements, and what kinds of illnesses might be more likely during certain times.
So it's like preventative medicine, but on a grander scale.
Yes, using those patterns to promote health and well-being for a whole community.
Fascinating. It reminds me of how we're rediscovering things like circadian rhythms today and how our health is impacted by being in sync with the natural cycles of day and night. It's like these ancient cultures were really onto something.
Totally. There's so much we can still learn from them, even if we don't interpret everything literally.
This deep dive has definitely made me want to explore these ideas further.
Well, as we wrap up, I have a final thought for you to ponder. If these ancient principles have any truth to them, how might that change how we view our own lives and health? Could paying attention to those subtle imbalances and natural cycles give us insights into our well-being?
That's a really thought-provoking question. It's like we've been given a whole new toolkit for understanding and navigating those complexities.
Exactly. It's an invitation to connect with nature more deeply, to listen to our own inner wisdom, and to live in a way that honors those rhythms and connections.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to embrace a little more of that ancient wisdom in my own life. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey through the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep exploring and keep seeking those aha moments.